So,
Good morning.
hello. Hi there.
How are you doing today?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good. We're so excited to have you on, Tim. It should be really interesting. We're excited to hear more from you.
Excellent. No, I'm very pleased to be here. It's my first Speakers for Schools broadcast. I've been around schools on school visits for a number of years, but this is my first go at this. I'm looking forward to it.
Good. So, as like an introduction, just so we can know who you are a little bit more, can you tell us about your career journey and what it is you do?
Okay, so I'm one of those people who never left university, but I did move around university departments in a slightly idiosyncratic way. So my first degree was actually a philosophy degree, where I was very interested in philosophy of language and philosophy of mind. And then after I completed that, I did a master's in an area that is called cognitive science. It's kind of fallen out of favor as a name, but it was the beginnings of artificial intelligence work. So in that master's degree, I learned quite a lot of psychology. I learned my first linguistics, and I also learned computer science. And then there was a sort of philosophy aspect to it, as well as could we make computers think, and what is thinking and consciousness and so on. So I studied that for a while, and on that program, I was lucky enough to hear Professor Malcolm Coulthard speak, and he was speaking about his early work in forensic linguistics. And there was a particular method that was being used in the courts, and he wanted someone to investigate that method because he couldn't see how it could work. So my master's dissertation, my research element of my master's program, investigated this method for identifying who wrote a particular bit of text. And indeed, I was able to show that it didn't work. And at the end of that, Malcolm said to me, well, could I do any better? Could I make a system that really would help identify who wrote a particular piece of text? And that eventually turned into a PhD, and then I got jobs at various universities. And I joined Aston University in 2008 to set up what was then the Centre for Forensic Linguistics. And there were just 3 of us. And over the years we had a very big government grant in 2019, which allowed us to expand. And so I'm now the director of the Aston Institute for Forensic Linguistics, which comprises about 25 staff, student and researchers. And we're the biggest grouping of forensic linguists in the world. So that's how I got here and who I am.
I did not know that you were part of the biggest group of linguistics in the world. That is something new already.
There you go.
Yeah, very exciting. So can you give us a little bit of an overview of what forensic linguistics is and how it's applied, in the field or just in reality?
Yes. So I like to describe forensic linguistics as an attempt to improve the delivery of justice through the analysis of language. So forensic linguistics is all about justice and making the world a better place. And what we're trying to do is do that through the analysis of language. Now, I've got a few slides. This isn't a slide-heavy show, but I thought it'd be quite useful. So if you could show slide 2, I'll speak to that a little bit. And for forensic linguistics, so sorry, 3, the next one then, falls into 2 main areas. One area is known as language and law, and the other area, investigative forensic linguistics. So the language and law evidence is we study the language of legal texts and legal processes to try and help with this aim of improving the delivery of justice. So, for example, forensic linguists have studied who understands the police caution. Yeah, what we know is that's a complicated thing that police officers deliver at the point of arrest. They're saying things like, you do not need to mention something that you later rely on in court. We've all heard this on the TV. Yeah, maybe you've heard it in real life if you're unlucky enough. Yeah, but that's complicated language. So we know that a sizable proportion of the population don't understand their rights through the delivery of the caution. So that's a justice issue. Can we improve the caution? Can we improve the understanding of the caution? Similarly, there's study of written legal texts. Probably most people on this call have a mobile phone, and probably almost no one on the call read their mobile phone contract. Yeah. And the reason for that is it's really hard to read. It's really difficult language. So why is legal language difficult? Why can't it be written in a way that's easier to understand? So forensic linguists study all these topics in the area of language and law, from the caution to the police interview through to courtroom linguistics and so on, how questions and answers operate in the courtroom. Then there's the bit that forensic linguists are perhaps more known for, and what people think of as forensic linguistics, which is the analysis of materials, language materials, to help police with their inquiries or to take language evidence to court. And this we call investigative forensic linguistics. And there's various sub areas in that. So my expertise is in authorship analysis, which is various ways of working out who wrote something. But there are other areas too where I've given evidence. So I've done quite a lot of cases on what someone meant in court. So a slang meaning. And very often, if there are sub-varieties of English or sub-varieties of a language which involve slangs, the jury can't be expected to understand what that meaning is. So linguists can go to court in those sort of situations as well. So very briefly, that's sort of the scope of forensic linguistics. But to count as a forensic linguist, you've got to have this objective of improving justice, improving the delivery of justice, whether that's at a systemic level or whether it's in an individual case.
Really, really interesting. You don't really think of this so many. You're right in saying that I only really considered the the police side of it, and I didn't think about the other ways that it's used outside of that.
It's interesting because when we get involved in police cases, we're doing that, improving the delivery of justice at sort of an individual level, where hopefully, in that case, helping justice be served. But if you can improve how the police interview witnesses in really difficult cases like sexual assault cases or things like that, or just any witness in a case, and how they can better interview suspects. Yeah. And police interviews are question and answer sequences on the whole. So linguists are the people to study that and help those improvements. And, if we think it gets complicated with the interpreted police interview, if the suspect or witness doesn't speak English as a first language in the UK. Yeah. And linguists have researched all these areas. So if you can improve police interviewing, you're improving the delivery of justice at a systemic level rather than just in an individual case. So it all counts as forensic linguistics.
Yeah, definitely. Crazy, really. So can you oh, sorry, I just lost my train of thought then. So can you tell us, how is forensic linguistics used in those legal investigations and court proceedings?
Okay, so and this is the bit everyone usually wants to hear, who's not heard so much about it. So first, I said that my sort of main expertise is in authorship analysis, and on the slide that's still showing, I've broken. There's a diagram from something I wrote, which at the end there's some resources, and this is a free download ebook that people can get, and this diagram is from that, and it shows how authorship analysis, which is working out who wrote something, is not just one thing. So I'm going to start in the middle of the diagram where it says sociolinguistic profiling. So if you receive a text that might be a threatening communication, or it might be an extortion letter, and there's no suspect in the case, you might ask, well, who wrote it? What sort of person wrote it? Are they a man or a woman? How old are they? What's their education level? Are other languages influencing their English? And so on and so forth. Yeah, and that we call sociolinguistic profiling. If you have a suspect and you've seized documents from their phone or from their computer, and you've then got this, say, extortion letter, you then might get into the world of comparative authorship analysis, where you're saying, is it the same author who wrote these known documents and this queried or anonymous document? Yeah, so that's comparative authorship analysis. And there's a whole other area which we're developing. We've got research projects in, which is author search. So if you've got intercepted communications, so this might be, say there's a drug bust and a phone is seized and people get WhatsApp messages, but everyone they're writing to is relatively anonymous. Can you search the open internet to find those writers based on their language style? So we're trying to write search engines where we analyze a piece of language to give algorithmically, this is where there's quite a lot of maths involved, to analyze someone's language style to create a search of the open internet, so we can find where they've written on Twitter or Instagram or on a blog post or something like that. And that's where the leading edge of research is. It's a very hard problem to solve, but we're chipping away at that one too. So that's what authorship analysis is. And I thought I'd illustrate that with a particular case, which we're going to talk about. And so if you go on to the next slide, this is the start of this case. And I'll explain what this is. This is a picture of the inside of a bomb. And I'm talking about this case because it involves various different sorts of authorship analysis, and it shows the sort of strengths and weaknesses of what linguists can do. So this pipe bomb was set in Edinburgh in January 2018 in Princes Street Gardens. If any of you have been to Edinburgh or from Edinburgh on this call, it's below Edinburgh Castle. And this picture of the inside of the bomb was posted in a blog post which contained a claim of responsibility. Okay, so the police knew what the inside of the bomb looked like because they managed to, so what happened is a passerby noticed the suspicious package and alerted the police. The police went to recover the bomb and they managed to do so safely. It was a viable bomb, it could have gone off. And the police were able to understand what the inside of the bomb would look like because they had the bomb. And then on a blog post, and this is where it gets interesting, on a Mexican eco-anarchist website, a blog post appeared which said, essentially, we planted this bomb in Edinburgh, and contained this picture of the inside of the bomb. So we knew that the person who, or someone involved in the posting of that blog post had to be part of the people who had made the bomb, because there's no other way to get the picture of the inside of the bomb. And what you have then, you've got this Mexican, so eco-anarchist is the word I use. This is a made up word, nobody knows. So they were extreme environmentalists. The title of the group was Individualists Tending Towards the Wild, and they would make bombings and other actions against things like oil refineries and so on and so forth. But this was on, Princes Street Gardens, a public park. It's not an oil refinery, so there's a bit of a mismatch there. And the police approached me at Aston. We get quite a lot of approaches by investigating teams from across the UK and around the world. Can we help with an investigation? And they approached me, and it was at this stage, because it's a terrorist operation, it was all very closed. I wasn't able to show the materials to anyone else or talk to anyone else about it. But I was asked to read these blog posts and say, could I say anything about the writer? So if you go on to the next slide, there's some of the text here. I'm hoping it will animate. Yes, so don't click again. So one interesting feature immediately about this blog post is that it was parallel texts in English and in Spanish. So on this slide, we've got the English text on the right and the Spanish text on the left, and they are parallel texts. So I don't know whether any of you speak Spanish, but if you look at the little bit of writing above the image there, in the English, it says, my end is my beginning. And on the Spanish version on the left, it says exactly the same. So my basic task was to answer the question, what could I say about the writer? The police had no other clues at this point in their investigation, no other particular investigative leads. But they were asked, could I say anything about the person who wrote this text? Were they a native English writer? Were they a native Spanish writer? Could I say anything else about them at all? And this is a really tough task for a forensic linguist in general, because we know, for example, that men use language differently from women. This is part of the A-level English language or Lang Lit syllabus about language and gender. But can you use that information to say, well, this writer is more likely to be a man or a woman? It's always going to be very uncertain. And this kind of evidence is never used in a courtroom. It's not certain enough for the courtroom but it can, as in this case, help the police with their inquiries. It can help focus their investigation and help them search for someone or be used to identify someone later. Because this was a confidential case at the outset, I wasn't able to work with colleagues who speak Spanish. I speak no Spanish. I can more or less order a beer in Spain, but that's about it. And I wasn't allowed to use our more complicated computer systems, which require uploading text to servers and the rest of it, because that could create a security breach. So I was basically asked to do more or less a hand analysis. And if you just click, it should reveal some of my conclusions that I managed from my hand analysis. Oh, no. Okay, no, sorry. Yeah, so click twice. I think the slides have gone a bit strange because of the format of the meeting. So my conclusions, no, back one, thank you. My conclusions were that it was neither a native English speaker nor a native Spanish speaker. Okay, it seemed to me, I did an analysis of the direction of the translation, and it seemed to me that the Spanish version was based on the English version rather than the other way around. This was with me picking through Spanish grammar books, and if you're teaching Spanish people English, there's research out there on what sort of errors they might make in their English, and I found some of these errors. I found errors in the English, but they didn't indicate that they were a Spanish writer. So I was working through this, trying to say what I could say. I did say that the English language version was very distinctive. This is just a paragraph from one of the blog posts. And it seemed a very unusual writer, just putting it like that. It's odd. The language here is odd. I mean, we read a lot of odd language, and I don't mean that the content is unusual, but there's sort of a lot of education, a lot of use of rare words. There's a lot of very long sentences. There's a lot of lists, a lot of use of adjectives and adverbs and so on. It's not, it's quite a distinctive language style. So I said that if we could find other texts by this individual, we might be able to match it. But as you can see from my conclusion, it's not really helpful for the police inquiry at this stage. The other thing I tried to do is some of the author search, but that didn't work with this, partly because I couldn't use the computational techniques we sometimes use. So that was that. And the police went away for 2 years and continued their inquiries. And then they came back to me in, I think it was 2020, and they said, we now have a suspect. And they got that suspect from tip-off from Interpol. And they said, we think the writer of the blog post, and therefore perhaps the bomber, was in fact a Greek national. And they have a band. And if you go to the next slide, the band was a thrash metal band called Face of Another. And this is from their Bandcamp webpage. And on the Bandcamp webpage, we had some music lyrics, and we had little paragraphs talking about the musical style of the band and their ideology and so on. And the police said, you asked for comparison material. Can you compare these writings with the blog post to give us evidence that it is indeed, our suspect is indeed the writer of the blog post? Now, in authorship analysis, it can be very difficult to do what we call cross-genre analysis. So if I've got a blog post, which was essentially a political writing, and I've got lyrics from a song, that's two entirely different genres. And we change our language style when we write across genres. If I'm comparing emails with emails, the authorship analysis will be more certain than if I'm comparing band lyrics to sort of political writings. And so with this cross-genre analysis, my conclusions were going to be very uncertain, but I did find links. I did say that it's credible that these are written by the same author. And if all they wanted to use my evidence for was to get a search warrant to search the individual's home, and people have heard of beyond reasonable doubt as a standard of proof in a criminal trial, and they may have heard of the balance of probabilities as the standard of proof in a civil trial. So to get a warrant in the United Kingdom, you have to show reasonable suspicion. So you go before the judge, the police would go before the judge and say, we've got reasonable suspicion that this person is the suspect, is a good chance of being the perpetrator. Can we raid their house? And that reasonable suspicion criteria was what our evidence was used for. Interestingly, as part of their case for the warrant, they also employed a forensic meteorologist who said that some of the clouds in the pictures here also appeared on the blog post, but that's not my expertise, but I'd never heard of that before, so I thought it was a point of interest. So they did indeed submit a warrant, which was approved by the court, and they managed to raid the house, and that led to the seizing of the individual's computer, and then we had an awful lot of writing. So if you go to the next slide, this enabled us to do the proper comparative authorship analysis. At this stage, I brought in a colleague, Dr. Izzy Clark, who's now at University of Lancaster. And this is really important. I've been working on this case 2.5 years by this point, and so I'm part of the police investigation. And if you want to take evidence to court, you've got to have a really independent scientific view, and we're all subject to what's sometimes called confirmation bias. So I got Izzy in to do the analysis, and she did the final analysis, which would have provided evidence to court. And I didn't tell her any of the backstory. I just said, these texts here, do you think they're the same author as these texts there? And she did her analysis, which did indeed reach the conclusion that they were likely to have the same author. And what happened was that on the basis of all the evidence in the case against Kavanakas here, who's pictured, he pleaded guilty. So this quite frequently happened. He pleaded guilty because the evidence was so strong against him, because he would have had a longer prison sentence if he'd been pleaded not guilty and then been found guilty. And that's what happens quite often in trials. And so he's currently in prison, and the authorship analysis was used in the various stages of the investigation and would have been used in evidence in the case too. So that's just as quick as I could, and I want to leave time for questions, an example of an authorship analysis and how it can be used in the courtroom. So I don't know whether you've got any follow-up questions to that, or I'm very happy to go back to some of the detail. Oh, I can't hear you.
Oh, that always happens at least once a week.
Yeah.
I forget to unmute myself. So we have like 2 more formal questions, and then we'll move on to our student questions. So those watching, if you have questions and you're interested and you want to ask something, now's the time to get those questions in, because we're going to be answering them in just a couple of minutes. So for you, Tim, our next question then is, what are the best and worst bits about forensic linguistics?
So the best bits are really when you feel you have made a difference. And you can do that in all the sorts of ways I talked about at the beginning. Maybe you've achieved a policy change in the way police interviewing is done or cautioning is done, or maybe you've really helped in a trial. I should say we often work for the defense. It's not all prosecution work. So our aim is to improve the delivery of justice. It's not to get successful prosecutions. We'd also like help to acquit the innocent. Yeah, and that's as important. Those are definitely the best bits. The worst bits, I guess, are actually we're exposed to an awful lot of really nasty material. A lot of our work is about online crime, and a lot of that is online child abuse. And so we read a lot of really disturbing material. And to do this work, if you're interested in a career in this area, it's certainly something to think about. And we have supervising psychologists who work with us to help us deal with that kind of exposure to difficult material. But it's a real issue, and we take it seriously. So it does come with its downsides for sure. Yeah,
definitely. I imagine that could get a little bit hard to deal with at times.
Yeah, and we do try and we're taught techniques and tips, and a lot of which is to close things down at the end of the day and walk away from it and have breaks from it and things like that. But so we are taught how to deal with it, but it takes a toll sometimes.
Yeah, definitely a skill sometimes.
Yeah,
Letting go and learning to to leave things
absolutely.
and deal with things is something we develop.
Yeah,
So this question is it's coming from a lot of schools as well,
yeah.
basically. So a lot of people have been asking this. Um, so we've included it in our main questions, which is, what qualifications are typically needed if someone's interested in going into this as a career? Do you advise university, or do you advise something like an apprenticeship?
Okay. So it's almost certainly university. There's no standard career path in forensic linguistics. We're too new a discipline for that. So there are 2 or 3 master's courses around the world, including, I have to say, at Aston University. We offer an excellent master's program. So master's program is the degree that you would do after the first degree. So I'll start at the other end. I'll start with sort of A levels and what A levels you might consider. So you certainly need an A level, which involves some element of English language. So there's a Langlit A level, and there are English language A levels on their own. You'd certainly want to be doing an A level in that area. Now, the next bits I'm going to say is a slightly surprising combination. I think the ideal person will have maths or computer science as well as English language, and maybe also one of the social sciences, so psychology or sociology or something like that. So for me, that would make the ideal A-level combination for forensic linguistics. But almost nobody has that. And there are lots of very successful forensic linguists who really avoid the maths and computational end of stuff, and they have successful careers too. So it's not absolutely necessary.
Yeah,
You would then certainly want to study at university some degree which had an element of English language or linguistics in it. So many university degrees are only English literature. Yeah, if you start, and so you'd want to look at what you were signing up to. You need to become more expert in language description skills, how you describe language at a really fine level, and that's really important. Some people do joint honours to include psychology or computer science, or one of the other things I've talked about. But we've had people on our master's programs who have initially trained as speech language therapists, where you have very strong language description skills. So there's a mix of people who would come into the master's level program. And there's no certain route. Most practitioner forensic linguists do a lot of university study. Most of them, but not all of them, will go on to study at PhDs. But now government is increasingly hiring forensic linguists off our master's program. So crime analyst jobs within the police or intelligence analysts in the intelligence services all have adverts now where they're looking for language analysts, linguists to do the work. And then on the other side of things, there's people who work in witness support areas or work as intermediaries in court, helping people with communication in courtroom or police interviewing and so on. So there's different routes and different outcomes to those routes as well. It's a discipline where it's very much design your own career path rather than that there's a given one. You know, if you study psychology and you want to get into clinical psychology, there's a very defined route that you would follow. It's not the same in forensic linguistics, where it's much more open than that, which for some people creates a lot of uncertainty that they're unhappy with, and for others it's a lot of opportunity. So like I say, it's an area that is growing, and I think will only grow. So I think the prospects are good, but in terms of careers, there's no definitive route.
Okay, thank you for answering that one. We'll move on to our student one now. And they've asked this question. I'm starting with it because it was an extra end one and it's the same one. So All Saints Catholic High School have asked, what advice would you give to someone who wants to enter this field?
So I think the advice is, you know, that it's a fascinating field to do. You've really got to enjoy the nitty-gritty of language analysis for whatever purpose. It all starts with those language description skills, and so you should work on those skills. And what's rewarding about it is this idea that you're making a difference in the world. You're making the world a better place in one way or another. And I think that, so if you've got that kind of drive, it's not, you know, the rewards aren't financial particularly. You know, it's not a very rich area to go in, and a lot of people's career paths are uncertain and so on. But the advice, if you're interested in this fine-grained description and you want to make a difference in the world really positively, it is something to think about going into.
Okay, our next one then, we've got quite a lot to pick on, and we've got loads coming in live as well,
Okay.
which is really nice. So we'll go with one of the live ones then, which is this is probably a a difficult one to answer.
Okay.
But how many crimes have you helped solve?
Okay. So I'm going to question the question a little bit at first, in the sense that I think media representations of sort of outside experts in criminal investigations, like a forensic linguist would be, not the police I'm talking about, tend to make them the hero of every investigation. Yeah, so you know, there's Sherlock Holmes comes in and shows the police to be dumb, and his brilliance solves the crime. It's really not like that. Okay, you make a contribution to investigation. So that Police Scotland case I was talking about, the linguistic element was a small element. It didn't solve the crime. Interpol and the Police Scotland found the suspect. Yeah, so we don't. You play a part and you have a role, and that's absolutely true. But it's not. You're not the hero of your own detective story. Okay, so I'll just a little bit of questioning the question, but I have been involved in hundreds of cases over the years. I get 30 or 40 inquiries to be involved in a case. I've done less recently, but a few years ago, I would take on 7 or 8 cases a year, and I would end up in court in 1 or 2, because I didn't go to court in the Kovanakis case. So I don't go, you know, there's an attrition. You don't always end up giving evidence in court, but that doesn't mean that your evidence wasn't used. It would have contributed to the guilty plea. So yes, so I've not counted is the answer, but plenty.
Yeah, there's like quite a few.
Yeah.
Great. Our next question then, and I will say thank you for this person for bearing with us, because they had a little bit of technical issue trying to see it, but we've got there in the end with them, and they've asked a question. This is from Tim, funnily enough. So Tim has asked, how useful are foreign language A-level or degrees to help the study of forensic linguistics?
So absolutely. I've been talking about English language forensic linguistics, and obviously it's international, and forensic linguists cover all languages. This case had 3 potential languages in it: the Greek and the Spanish, as well as the English. And a lot of the research is in other language influence detection. So this is if someone's writing in one language on the internet, and that might be in English, or it might be, say, in Spanish, what other languages are influencing their English or Spanish, which was a little part of this case. Retrospectively, I was able to find evidence that it was a Greek writer, but I didn't find that prospectively, so it was no use to the investigation. I went back to look to see, could I have worked that out? So knowledge of other languages is really can be important for forensic linguists. In our institute, we have speakers of Polish, Russian, Farsi, Spanish, Italian, French, and so on. A lot of those are native speakers and second language English speakers, but some are the other way around. And so we do work across languages. Just learning a language is of itself not skill enough. You've got to be able to have the language description skills on top. So the discipline of linguistics is about language description. And so in, say, the English language A-levels, or the ones that involve English language, you learn some language description skills. And mostly you focus those on English, but of course you can focus them on these other languages too. So speaking another language is definitely, or many other languages, even if you're really going for it, is definitely advantageous.
Yeah, really interesting to think about. I'll move straight on so we can get as many as we can. We've had this question come in anonymously, and it's what is the day-to-day tasks or work that you can do as a forensic linguist? Do you have a range of types of areas that you work on a daily basis?
Okay, so first of all, I'm a university academic. My daily work involves students and research and things like that. The investigative casework that I get involved in is on the side. But there are, so our graduates from our master's program do go into policing and intelligence jobs where they would be doing, in a sense, relatively full-time work as an analyst, an intelligence or crime analyst. But what they report back to us is their forensic linguistic skills are used and used regularly and a lot, but about half their time is used up on other analysis skills. So these kind of organizations, they employ psychologists and anthropologists and other behavioral scientists, but they'll also employ linguists now, and they want a team of people who can work together on things. So the kind of things will be authorship analysis. You get people, so if you think of the online space where you get really big messaging groups on WhatsApp or Telegram or something like that, you can be asked to characterize, I don't know what the word is, I'm saying, talk about the sort of the communicative culture of that group and what their concerns are and what their attitudes are. So we might be asked to look at a big online far right or anarchist forum and talk about their concerns, and people do risk assessments and things like that. Now, the process of risk assessment is much more psychological than linguistic, but the linguist can help describe the stance of the individuals towards the various groups they may be talking about and things like that. So there's a whole range of tasks in those jobs, which will involve your linguistic analysis skills, and you'd be valued for your language analysis skills, I guess. I've sort of answered the question, I hope.
Yeah, and it links back to what you said earlier, how psychology and that sort of that socio side it really links well with forensics as well, linguistics. Okay, so we have time for 2 or 3 more questions, I think, before we're getting towards the end of the session. So I'll fire on. Another anonymous question is, do you think AI could reduce the number of job opportunities in forensic linguistics?
Short answer is no. I think it will change the field and is already changing the field of forensic linguistics. So everyone this last year has become familiar with ChatGPT. We were working on large language models over the last 5 or 6 years, but it hit the headlines as they got bigger and better, and the marketing of them suddenly exploded across the world. So one of the things that we look at is author obfuscation techniques. So if you're writing on the internet, say, and you're writing, say, on the dark web in a criminal context, you might want to disguise your language. And obviously, one way of doing that is to tell one of these large language models to write messages for you. So we can certainly detect that a large language model has been used, something like ChatGPT has been used. And we can even say which variety of language model has been used. But the other thing to say is that there's a lot of discussions. So if you go into dark web spaces, which we do occasionally, with proper ethical and legal approvals and everything else, I should emphasize, that there's lots of discussion on some forum of language disguise and how they can use these techniques. But what's intriguing is they're not using them in these discussions. So they're still as identifiable as they always were through the language. But we also use the same technologies to help with the authorship analysis work. Yeah. So we're using the AI in the author search domain and in comparative authorship analysis to help determine who wrote something and what the characteristics were of the person. So it will change the discipline. As I've said, forensic linguistics isn't only authorship analysis, and that's the area where AI is most prevalent. But determining meanings is another area where you might use AI and language models, but I don't see it. It will change the discipline. It won't prevent the need for a forensic linguist.
Great, I'm glad that one got asked because we had that as well in our pre-submitted questions in various places. Definitely a lot of interest around how AI is going to affect it. So thank you for answering that one. Pardon me. My next question then comes in from Heath Farm School, and they've asked, what books can I read to get a feel for the subject?
So if you go to the very last slide in the set, I've got a resources slide. And here is film, TV, and book recommendations. So there are on the right-hand side there, there are really, I think it's appropriate for A-level students to read An Introduction to Forensic Linguistics by Coulthard, Johnson, and Wright. We do get our university students to read it, but it's a really accessible read. I'm not saying it's all easy, but dipping in and out of that would be of interest. And also the book by me there as well is free to download, so there's no cost to having a look at it. You can just search for the title and you'll find it on the Cambridge University Press website that it's free to download. And certainly the opening sections of that about the history of authorship analysis work, the second half gets a bit more technical, but might suit some people. If you're in the world of fiction, there's a couple of really good books by Danuta Rare, who has attended a lot of our summer schools and training and is a novelist who writes about forensic linguistics occasionally. And so that's it's a slightly dark genre of crime fiction, but is interesting. And there's some film and TV recommendations there as well that you might pick up. And I've also linked to our website where, as well as some explanation of forensic linguistics, there's a whole video library of where we've had invited speakers and ourselves giving talks. And so we run seminar events and things like that. So you can have a browse through that and find out more about forensic linguistics too.
So I will say that all the links and things I'll share in the feedback email along with the recording of this broadcast as well. So don't worry about only having to have a look at that briefly. Anyone who's watching, they'll come to you as well afterwards by the end of today. So just keep a lookout. Sometimes these like to go to your junk box, so keep a lookout for that. Our final question then, before we have to look at kind of ending today's session and winding it down, comes from college, and they've asked, do you need to exercise caution with regard to region or ethical or ethnic prejudice in linguistic use, especially in criminal cases? And if so, how do you remain cautious and neutral?
So we do know as linguists that there are, in terms of accent and dialect and sub-varieties of a language, so English in this case, there are prejudices and attitudes against certain varieties of English. So if you speak with a Scouse accent or a Devonshire accent or a Birmingham accent, people will make assumptions about you, none of which are true, like any prejudice. The accent you've grown up with doesn't say anything about your character or your intelligence or any of these things. But we know these prejudices are out there. I think what can be more interesting and important is the work on slangs and street slangs. So there's a variety of English which is sometimes referred to as multicultural London English or British urban English, which draws heavily on Jamaican patois, but also other influences as well. And when people are using these varieties, there's sometimes an assumption that being used to hide the meanings from the rest of the population. Another area is Romany, where Romany is a language, and sometimes it's thought that it's used to hide the meanings, to conspire so the police can't understand. And indeed, these things can be used in these ways, but actually it's really quite rare. It's just the way that people speak to one another. So there is work for the linguist to do to help either interpret or sort of decode these sub-varieties of English so that a jury can understand what is said. I did a case some years ago where, so in multicultural London English, the phrase to duppy someone was a fairly rare item. I think this was 2014 or something, ages ago. And at that stage, it was pretty unknown. And a duppy is a ghost in Jamaican. And to duppy someone is to turn someone into a ghost, to potentially kill them. And it was a conspiracy to murder case. So I had to explain the jury the sort of the meaning behind that term, its origin, and what it might mean in this context. So that kind of language explanation is used, but we must be careful that it's not just prejudice. Just because someone speaks multicultural London English does not make them a bad person. You know, it doesn't mean they're automatically a criminal. It's just the language that's used in their communities. So yeah, you sometimes fight against those things.
Really, really interesting, and so great to have you on. That does bring us to the end of the time today. So before we end today's session, Tim, do you have any final thoughts or feelings or things you'd like to say to those watching before we end today's session?
So I think, I mean, we've talked about how it can be difficult to work as a forensic linguist, but also the opportunities and the motivations for doing it. I think it can, you know, if you're interested in language, if you're interested in English language or other languages, and you're looking for something that can really make a difference, that's what keeps us going. It's that sort of desire to use your learning to help make the world a better place in that broad sense. And it can be, because it's relatively ill-defined and relatively new still, it goes back to the 1960s or so, but it's still it's gaining acceptance and gaining importance as everyone goes online, and written language is used a lot more, yeah, because of the online space. So it's a really exciting area to be involved in. So with all the cautions and caveats that I've put out there, I do think it's a fascinating area to look into. And if you are interested, you know, you can commit now to a certain set of A levels and commit to doing an English language degree or something that involves language and linguistics in a degree. It doesn't commit you to becoming a forensic linguist, but it does absolutely leave that route open for you if it's an area you're interested in.